Hello everyone. So we are here to complete the last reading of I Was a Doctor in Auschwitz by Dr. GisellaPerl. Abbe Brandt. April 1945. A long line of British tanks and jeeps came rolling into the death camp of Belsen-Bergen. The dead were all there to receive them, lying along the road, in the ditches, and on top of the mountains of decaying, putrid corpses. But only a few of the survivors had strength enough to crawl out of their holes and salute the victors. Rivers of blood, pus, and human excrement flowed lazily across the road, and the fetid steam rising from them covered the camp like a heavy, smothering cloud. The strange, terrifying beings who were once men and women, before hunger and disease stripped them of their human appearance, slowed down the progress of the saviors because they lacked the strength to get out of the way of the tanks. Without any waste of time, the British went to work. They provided food for the bloated stomachs, established field hospitals by the hundreds, fought against rats and lice, and tried to create an atmosphere in which the rebirth of the desire to live was possible. In the cases of many, they were too late. In spite of their relentless work, the liberated inmates died by the hundreds, and new mass graves had to be dug to receive their tortured, disease-ridden bodies. It was June when Abbe Brandt arrived in Belsen-Bergen. His fame spread like wildfire through the camp. "There is a young priest here," people said to each other, "who comforts the suffering, feeds the hungry, and holds the hands of the dying with so much love and compassion that his mere touch eases the pain and banishes the fear of death. He never asks others about their religion and does not care in which language they speak to their God." At that time, I was working at the Gynecological Surgical Hospital R5, where young mothers, girls, children, and babies fought for life, which now was identical with freedom. I shall never forget him as I saw him that first day with his black cape over a British Army uniform, his big silver cross on a chain around his neck, his dark, burning eyes, and his young face showing signs of intense suffering. "I am Abbe Brandt," he said to me in French, "and I am a member of the Vatican mission. If there is anything I can do for you, help you in your work, help you ease the pain of your patients, please accept my helping hand." There was such a warmth, such real Christian love in his simple words, that the answer struck in my throat, and only my tears expressed the deep gratitude I felt for this man of God. I showed him around the hospital, and while we walked, words kept stumbling out of my mouth. I told him about Auschwitz, about the pregnant mothers and newborn babies who had to die in the flames, about my tragic efforts to save their lives, and about the inhuman suffering it cost me to prevent birth, the greatest, most beautiful miracle in the world. I spoke about my patients in Belsen-Bergen, where it was again permitted to give birth, where sick mothers suffering from typhus, starvation, exhaustion, revived at the sight of their newborn babies and gained new strength from the knowledge that their children needed them. I told him about my happiness when I awoke to the sound of babies crying and went to sleep at night with the wailing of those tiny human beings still ringing in my ears. "And I have no sugar," I said, "no milk, no rice to feed those wasted bodies. They need more nourishment, more wholesome food, if they are to be saved." He never interrupted me, only his young head bent deeper and deeper, as if the weight of sorrow and pain were too heavy to bear. The next day a truck stopped before the hospital, a truck filled with all the things we needed: sugar, milk, rice, chocolate, in large quantities. The little priest, that's what everyone called him in camp, unloaded the truck himself. He carried the heavy sacks and cartons until our little stockroom was filled with food, and then he went from bed to bed, handing a piece of chocolate to everybody, with a smile that was even sweeter than the delicacy he distributed. From then on, the little priest was a frequent visitor at the hospital. His hands were soft on the foreheads of the dying, cool and strong when they held down the body of a patient who fought against nightmares in her feverish dreams. His magic eyes brought love and comfort to everyone: French, Catholics, Dutch Protestants, Hungarian Jews, or adherents of the Russian Orthodox faith. Sometimes he appeared early in the morning or late at night, his face damp with exhaustion, to tell me about someone dying in Block 39. A man screaming with some pain in Block 51, a woman collapsing in the street. "Maybe you can help, doctor?" he said. "At least come and take a look at them." And already he dragged me by the hand telling me to hurry before it was too late. Day after day I watched him getting thinner, more ethereal, more transparent. He was never hungry, never tired, because there were always others who were hungrier than he, more tired than he. Only his eyes grew larger and his pale face, larger, more luminous, with the burning fever to help. It was in the middle of the summer of 1945. We knew that in the gardens of the world fruit was ripening, vegetables were growing, but it was not for us. The barbed wire fences still stood around Belsenbergen, and beyond the fences there was nothing but dry, empty flatness, and beyond the German villages inaccessible to the inmates of the camp. Abbe Braun knew our needs as he knew our thoughts and dreams. One morning he left the camp to visit the farms around us, and in the evening he returned with vegetables, lettuce, apples, to enrich our table with the sorely needed and badly missed vitamins. He was happy to give, happy as a mother when she feeds her child. Later he brought toys for the children, dolls and toy animals, books full of fairy tales and beautiful pictures. There was nothing he would not do to make our lives real, enjoyable, and worth living. He always knew where he was needed, and it did not matter to him whether it was day or night, rain or shine, if anyone yearned for the comfort of his presence. Sometimes we did not see him for a week. Then we knew that he had left for another camp to carry his love, his kindness, his helpfulness to the victims of Nazi inhumanity. When he returned, he would be thinner, sadder, his white hands more transparent. Only the cross on his breast seemed to grow and become more shiny all the time. His truck was never empty when he returned. Sometimes he brought a sick man or woman to our hospital, hoping that our care would still be able to save them. Sometimes he brought a mother whose child he knew in Belsenbergen, a sister or brother or child whose relative he knew was still alive in our camp. When someone needed a dress, they asked the little priest. Shoes, paper, warm clothing. He never said it was impossible, and nothing seemed to be impossible for him. He gave and gave, smiling with infinite love, as if giving were the only aim, the only dream of his life. One day I decided to prepare a surprise which would make Abbe Braun happy. We were great friends, and it meant much to me to be able to do something for him. I emptied one of my hospital rooms, put a table at the end, and facing the table, I put as many chairs as I could get. Then I walked all over the camp collecting flowers, which I put in that room. By Sunday, Abbe Braun had a church in which to celebrate Mass, his first Mass in Belsenbergen. Who can ever forget the happiness in his eyes when he entered the room and saw all the patients who were able to get out of bed sitting there, some with their babies in their arms. They were all there, Catholic and Protestant, Jew and Greek, Orthodox, and Abbe Braun spoke to them in German about love. In the afternoon, he came back to baptize the first children born in Belsenbergen. After this, he celebrated Mass every Sunday morning until one day, many weeks later, he was called to Paris. How empty the camp seemed without him. How cold and sad it suddenly became. Wherever I went, I heard the sick and healthy speak about him, about our little priest, wondering when he would return. Suddenly he was back again, his hands full of presents, food for the adults, toys and books for the children. He asked me and the nurses to come into the office and there handed each of us a little parcel. "I brought this for you from the Galerie Lafayette," he said. "I hope you'll like it. I don't understand about these things. I am a priest, but I wanted you to be women again, not only workers, and I want you to enjoy your youth." There was some face powder in that parcel, a piece of soap, and a little perfume. A message from Paris, a message from the big free world. He wanted us to forget Belsenbergen for a moment, to forget the blood, the filth, the endless agony, and our own helplessness in the face of death. Love was cheap in Belsenbergen. The liberated thousands, completely demoralized by long years of Nazi oppression, had no other aim than to satisfy their most basic instincts, hunger and sexual desire. Some sought love because it made them feel like human beings again. Others because they wanted to prove to themselves that they were still men and women. Others again because they wanted to enjoy their newly won freedom to the fullest. Then there were some who sold their bodies for cigarettes, chocolate, and other small comforts. Abbe Braun watched this open prostitution, which he did not know how to stop with ever-growing despair. The authorities could not help him, for they were not inclined to use drastic means against these people who had suffered hell. Abbe Braun set out alone. Wherever he went, he saw couples locked in an embrace on benches, leaning against trees at deserted corners. Sometimes the man wore the uniform of the British Army. Sometimes it was one of the prisoners who only a few weeks ago believed that his life was finished. He stopped the men and women and began talking to them. First, he asked them to tell him the story of their lives in every detail, until the past surrounded them like a veil shutting out the present. Then, only then, he spoke to them about the future. You are free now, he told them. Free like newborn children with the paths of life open before you. Why don't you try to start this new life free and unencumbered? I understand your drives and desires, but remember, you have many difficulties to face, and you will need all your physical and moral strength. Pregnancy and venereal disease will make your task only more difficult and complicated. To those who were willing to listen, he depicted the future, a fighting future, which was worth any effort and self-denial. His pockets were always full of cigarettes and chocolate, and many a time he prevented prostitution by giving generously and freely. Sometimes he was laughed at, mocked, abused, but he never gave up, and the results of his relentless work could soon be felt throughout the entire camp. In room number 12, there was a dead girl on the bed. Her mother, a young woman of 38, lay in the other bed beside her daughter. She had typhus, but it was not the only fever that racked her thin, wasted body. In her delirium, she constantly spoke about her daughter Agnes, about the past, the present, and the future, but always in connection with her daughter. For 2 years, this woman had protected her 16-year-old daughter. They had been at Auschwitz, then in a war factory near Hamburg, until finally in Belsen-Bergen. She had given her bread, her soup, to the child. She had held her close to protect her against the cold, against blows and brutality. And now, when they were finally free, Agnes died and left her forever. Abbe Braun sat by her bed for hours at a time. He knew, as we knew, that her case was hopeless. For hours he listened to the screams, the curses, the sacrilegious words of the unfortunate mother, never blaming her, never losing his patience. One morning she sat up in bed and kept her eyes on the door until Abbe Braun entered the room. Then she began to scream. I want a tombstone for my Agnes, Abbe. I want a memorial for her. I won't get out of here until I have the tombstone for my daughter. The priest laid her back gently on her pillow. I have thought of it myself, he said. Agnes must have a tomb, and she shall have it. But you must be patient. We smiled sadly. A tombstone in Belsen-Bergen, where the mass graves were never big enough, never deep enough to receive the dead, where the British Army toiled like slaves to satisfy primary necessities of the camp. But the Abbe had promised, and he had never broken a promise before. Many days went by. Agnes's mother got better and better. The priest came by to see her every day, and they sat on the edge of her bed, their heads close together, whispering excitedly as if they had a great secret together. Then, when the poor mother was strong enough to stand on her feet, Abbe Braun came to speak to me. Doctor, he said, tomorrow I want you to come with me. We are going to go to Agnes's grave. The next morning, the entire hospital waited excitedly for the arrival of the priest. When we finally saw him coming down the road, he looked like a young Moses with the stone tablets in his hands. He carried a grave marker made of wood, beautifully worked, with big blue letters on it saying, Here lies our Agnes, to remain with us forever. He put the tablet into the hands of the mother, who looked at it with tears in her eyes, tears of gratitude and solace. Then we set out toward the grave. Abbe Braun went ahead, holding Agnes's mother by the arm, the Jewish woman, and the Catholic priest. Behind them came people of many nationalities and many religions, united by common suffering, loyalty, and love. At the grave, Abbe Braun knelt down on the ground and put the handmade monument into the soft earth. Then he got up again and began to pray, In nomine Dei. When he finished his prayer, he turned to the mother. Agnes is happy now. She looks down upon her mother and many friends, and she sends them peace. Amen. Then he led her back to her bed at the hospital, cured in body and soul. I don't know whether that little tombstone still stands in Belsen-Bergen, but I hope it is there, in memory of a dead child and in memory of a great heart, Abbe Braun, who will never cease, as long as he lives, to give peace and kindness to those who need it. It was fall. There were fewer and fewer people in the camp. The French, Dutch, Czechoslovakians, Yugoslavs who survived typhus and TB returned to their countries, but there were still thousands left behind, the sick and the homeless Jews. They had no place to go. Nobody was waiting for them. No country wanted to have them back. Disillusioned, hopeless, they lived from day to day. Yom Kippur, the Day of Atonement, was coming. The first free Yom Kippur in Bergen-Belsen. Without parents, without children, without families. My hospital was full. It had a good name, and women from many camps came to seek a cure for their ills. Before the holiday, I spoke to our little priest. I wanted to have my patients celebrate their holiday with many candles and a feast table in honor of our dead. He, the 26-year-old wise, kind priest, understood. He brought candles, honey, fruit, and many cans of food, and a bunch of flowers for every patient who was unable to leave her bed. When the next day I got up to speak at our table, I spoke to him, Abbe Brand, who made it possible for us to celebrate our Jewish holiday, who made it possible for us to live. A few weeks later, Abbe Brand played a very important role in my life. The American Joint Distribution Committee in Paris informed the Belsen-Bergen authorities that I had received a priority certificate for Palestine. I left Belsen-Bergen to wander from one camp to the other throughout Germany, trying to find my husband, my son. After 19 days of wandering on foot along deserted highways, I learned that my husband had been beaten to death shortly before the liberation, and my son had been cremated. When I returned to Belsen-Bergen, I did not want to live. There was enough poison at the hospital, poison which in small quantities served as medicine. I took some of it. Later I learned that Abbe Brand, who had been away for weeks, chose that particular day to return to Belsen-Bergen. He came to my room and found me lying on my bed. He ran for the British physician who was just in time to save my life. When I came to, I saw Abbe Brand sitting on my bed, holding his silver cross, praying. He came to see me several times a day. He had a telephone installed in my room, and when he couldn't come, he telephoned to give me courage, to share with me his faith, to give me a new will to live. He was my doctor, my friend, my savior, and I understood better than ever why the sick and the dying loved him so much. When I was strong enough to get up, I returned to my work, half insane with pain and sorrow, like a wounded animal. In the meantime, Abbe Brand obtained papers, permits, corresponded with Paris, and one morning the white car of the Vatican mission stopped in front of the hospital. There was an armchair in it for me, and a little later the car rolled through the gates of Belsen-Bergen, leaving behind the barbed wire fence and all it represented. We traveled for 2.5 days. At night he made me rest, first at a Dutch, then at a Belgian convent, and during the day he treated me like a sick child. The third day we arrived in Paris. My eyes hurt from the many lights, my ears from the noise. What was to happen to me? Where was I to go? Abbe Brand stopped the truck and led me into a beautiful, elegant home. It was the home of a French dentist in one of the residential sections of Paris. I brought you a wonderful woman from Belsen-Bergen, the little priest told them. A woman whose soul is still a little ill after all the horrors of many prison camps. Take care of her until tomorrow morning. I shall sleep in the truck with the driver. Sleep well, he said to me. You are safe here in the house of my old friends. He reached under his black cape and brought out a bottle of good old wine. I want you to celebrate your first evening in Paris. That evening was like a dream. Good food, wine, interesting conversation, wonderful French manners. We spoke about Abbe Brand. My host, too, loved him and considered him a saint. Afterwards, I slept in a real bed between silken sheets. In the morning he came to get me. I was to stay at a convent in the Rue de la Tombe Assor, and he asked the Mother Superior to take good care of me. But he did not leave me yet. He went with me to the Joint Distribution Committee and the Palestine Bureau and fought for me, for my future, as if he, the Catholic priest, carried the tragedy of the entire Jewish people on his shoulders. Then he returned to Belsen-Bergen, and I remained at the convent trying to regain my health and my balance. The Abbé wrote me encouraging letters, and slowly, very slowly, I began to feel human again. A few weeks later he came back to Paris, thinner, paler than I remembered him. His mission at Belsen-Bergen was finished and he was going away. Before he left, he kissed my forehead and looked sadly at the concentration camp number on my arm. He asked me to believe in love and to give love wherever I go. Then he disappeared into the cold, rainy autumn night. And that is the end of I Was a Doctor in Auschwitz. So one of the things before I leave this video I did want to talk about is I have had some questions regarding the books that I keep on my bookshelf. And while you may see a lot of Hitler, what you don't see are a lot of these other books, which I will display one by one. And one of the things in life that has troubled me very much is groupthink. Groupthink destroys lives. Groupthink killed that woman on a bridge in California when she was in a collision, I believe, with a man, and a group formed around her, and because no one stood out from the group, she was so afraid of the man, she jumped to her death from the bridge. So groupthink doesn't have to start a gulag or a concentration camp, but it often does leave there. So that is why I have all of these books, not just on Hitler. I have books on Stalin and other world leaders. But if I can say one thing, my mission in life is to stop groupthink wherever I see it happening, so that nobody ever has to be dehumanized, degraded, insulted. So that is why I have all of these strange books around me, but I promise you, I do read normal books. I will pop up a couple of those. And okay, after that speech, this is going to sound a little weird, but there is one book that I do recommend, and that is called Explaining Hitler by Rosenbaum. This is a book that puts together all of the theories about him and his actions. And just a little tantalizing bit. The Jewish doctor who tried to save his mother from breast cancer, Hitler had him safely escorted out of the country into America. And it also has, what I think is the most important, is what Rosenbaum calls the first explainers. A lot of people like to pretend they did not see the beast slouching towards Berlin, and that is not true. The Munich Post put their lives on the line, starting, I believe, as early as 1922, to try to warn the people of Germany, and they did not want to listen. So there you have it. I have an eclectic reading taste, but I am a psychology major, and my goal in life is that we are all treated as equals and no one has to be dehumanized again. Thank you for watching this video. This is the end of the series. I did find a new doctor, and I am very hopeful we are going to get to the bottom of things, but I do get tired very easily. So I am working in an internal order I have in my brain on my videos of what I needed to get finished first. So I will have another book review next week, as well as a product review, or in the next 2 weeks, depending on my energy level, because let's face it, being in constant pain just saps my energy. But that's neither here nor there. I hope all of you out there are happy, healthy, and safe, and I will see you in the next review.